One of the most unsettling moments in a narcissistic relationship occurs when the narcissist begins to realize that their influence is slipping away. For a long time, they may have relied on a predictable pattern. They say something hurtful and you react. They withdraw affection and you chase after them. They create confusion and you work tirelessly to restore peace. This cycle gives them a sense of control because they can anticipate your responses and use them to maintain their position in the relationship. The moment that pattern changes, however, something shifts beneath the surface. When they notice that you are no longer reacting the way you once did, it can trigger an intense sense of panic that many people never see coming. To understand why this happens, it is important to recognize that control often serves as a substitute for genuine connection. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, empathy, and emotional honesty. Control is unnecessary because both people willingly participate in the relationship. A narcissist, however, may struggle with these foundations. Instead of creating a secure bond through vulnerability and respect, they often seek reassurance through influence and dominance. Their sense of security comes from knowing they can affect your emotions, your decisions, your confidence, and even your perception of reality. As long as they can do that, they feel powerful and protected. This is why your emotional reactions become so valuable to them. Every argument, every tear, every attempt to explain yourself can serve as evidence that they still have access to your inner world. Even when the interaction is negative, it confirms that they matter enough to provoke a response. Many people mistakenly believe that anger is a sign of disconnection, but for someone who craves control, anger can still feel like a form of attachment. It proves that they occupy space in your thoughts and emotions. What truly threatens them is not your anger, it is your emotional detachment. When you begin to heal, something remarkable happens. You stop seeking answers to questions that may never be answered. You stop replaying conversations in your head, trying to understand every contradiction. You stop hoping that one more discussion will finally make them see your perspective. You stop measuring your worth by their approval. Gradually, your focus shifts away from them and back toward your own life. The energy that was once invested in managing the relationship begins flowing into your personal growth, your goals, your peace of mind, and your future. At first, the narcissist may not notice the change. They may assume that your silence is temporary or that you will soon return to familiar patterns. But as time passes, they begin to recognize something unusual. The messages are shorter. The arguments no longer escalate. The attempts to provoke you produce little or no reaction. The emotional hooks that once worked so reliably suddenly seem ineffective. This is when panic often begins to emerge. That panic is rooted in the realization that they are losing access to something they once took for granted. The person they believed would always respond, always explain, always fight for the relationship is no longer playing the role they expected. For someone who depends on control to feel secure, this loss can feel deeply threatening. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is something they often struggle to tolerate. They may begin questioning why their usual strategies are failing. They may become increasingly focused on regaining your attention, not necessarily because they value the relationship in a healthy way, but because they cannot accept losing their influence over you. The panic can manifest in different ways. Sometimes it appears as sudden charm and affection. They may become attentive, apologetic, and unusually kind. They may say things you have wanted to hear for years. They may make promises that sound convincing and heartfelt. To an outside observer, it can look like genuine transformation. But beneath the surface, the driving force is often fear. They sense that they are losing their position in your life and they are scrambling to restore it before it disappears completely. In other cases, the panic takes a darker form. Instead of becoming affectionate, they become more aggressive. They may criticize you more harshly, accuse you of being selfish, or attempt to provoke guilt. They may create unnecessary drama or manufacture conflicts that seem to come out of nowhere. These behaviors are often desperate attempts to generate a reaction. Any reaction. If they can make you angry, defensive, or upset, they regain evidence that they still have power over your emotions. What makes this dynamic so disturbing is that the behavior is often less about love and more about control. Genuine love respects another person's freedom. Genuine love does not panic when someone establishes healthy boundaries. Genuine love does not require constant emotional access in order to feel secure. But when control has become the foundation of the relationship, your independence can feel like a direct threat to the narcissist's sense of stability. The more you continue moving forward without seeking their validation, the more obvious this becomes. Your calmness begins to expose the weakness of the tactics that once seemed so powerful. Your refusal to engage reveals that the cycle only worked because you participated in it. Your growth demonstrates that their influence was never as permanent as they believed. This realization can be deeply unsettling for someone who built their sense of importance around controlling others. Perhaps the most significant lesson in all of this is that the panic you witness is not evidence that you are losing something valuable. In many cases, it is evidence that you are finally reclaiming something that was always yours, your emotional freedom. The less dependent you become on their approval, the less power they have over your choices. The less you react to their attempts to manipulate you, the more confidence you gain in your own judgment. And the more secure you become within yourself, the more difficult it becomes for anyone to control you through fear, guilt, confusion, or emotional pressure. One of the clearest signs that a narcissist recognizes they are losing their grip on you is that they begin intensifying their tactics. The behaviors that once seemed occasional may suddenly become more frequent, more dramatic, and more difficult to ignore. This escalation often catches people off guard because they assume that emotional distance will cause the narcissist to simply move on. Instead, the opposite can happen. When a narcissist senses that their usual methods are no longer producing the desired results, they often increase the pressure in an attempt to regain the influence they feel slipping away. For a long time, many narcissistic relationships operate according to an unspoken pattern. The narcissist learns which emotional buttons to push and which strategies are most effective. They discover what makes you feel guilty, what causes you to seek their approval, and what keeps you engaged in endless attempts to prove yourself. Over time, these patterns become familiar. The narcissist comes to expect certain reactions because those reactions have been consistently available in the past. They know that a cold shoulder may cause you to chase after them. They know that criticism may make you work harder for validation. They know that silence may trigger anxiety and uncertainty. These responses become predictable sources of control. The problem for the narcissist begins when those responses disappear. The criticism that once hurt no longer seems to affect you. The silent treatment no longer sends you into panic. The guilt trips no longer make you abandon your boundaries. The emotional games that once consumed your attention suddenly lose their effectiveness. From your perspective, this change may feel like healing. You are becoming less reactive and more grounded. From the narcissist's perspective, however, it feels like a loss of power. Most people respond to failure by reevaluating their approach. They may ask themselves whether their behavior needs to change or whether a healthier strategy would produce better results. A narcissist often responds differently. Instead of questioning the tactic itself, they simply increase its intensity. If a little manipulation no longer works, they may try more manipulation. If mild criticism no longer affects you, they may become harsher. If subtle guilt fails to produce a reaction, they may resort to dramatic accusations or emotional outbursts. This escalation is driven by urgency. The narcissist is trying to solve a problem. The problem is that the person they once influenced is becoming emotionally unavailable to manipulation. Rather than accepting this reality, they often view it as a challenge to overcome. Their focus shifts toward restoring the old dynamic. They become increasingly determined to pull you back into familiar patterns because those patterns gave them a sense of control and predictability. One common tactic involves creating emotional emergencies. Suddenly, everything becomes urgent. There is always a crisis, a conflict, or a situation that demands your immediate attention. Problems that could be handled calmly become dramatic events. Small disagreements are transformed into major confrontations. The goal is often to overwhelm your emotional defenses and pull you back into a reactive state where they feel more comfortable operating. Another tactic involves provoking arguments. The narcissist may bring up old issues that were supposedly resolved. They may deliberately misunderstand what you are saying. They may accuse you of things that make little sense or criticize you over minor matters. To an outside observer, the behavior can seem irrational. In reality, the narcissist may be searching for proof that they still matter enough to affect your emotions. If they can make you angry, frustrated, or defensive, they regain a sense of influence. This is why some narcissists appear to become more hostile precisely when you become calmer. Your peace disrupts the system they relied upon. Every time you refuse to engage in unnecessary conflict, you expose the weakness of their strategy. Every time you respond with emotional stability instead of chaos, you demonstrate that their tactics are losing power. That realization can lead to even greater attempts to provoke a reaction. Sometimes the escalation takes the form of sudden affection rather than aggression. The narcissist may become surprisingly attentive. They may shower you with compliments, gifts, promises, or declarations of love. They may act like the person you always hoped they would become. For someone who has spent years longing for validation, this sudden change can feel incredibly convincing. Yet the timing often reveals what is really happening. The transformation appears not when the relationship is healthy, but when the narcissist senses they are losing control. This creates confusion because the behavior seems contradictory. One day they are criticizing you, and the next day they are praising you. One moment they appear angry, and the next they seem deeply loving. These rapid shifts are not necessarily signs of genuine emotional growth. More often, they reflect a desperate search for whatever method will successfully regain your attention. The narcissist is testing different approaches to see which one produces the strongest response. There is also a tendency for narcissists to become increasingly intrusive when they feel disconnected. They may contact you more frequently than usual. They may appear unexpectedly in places where they know you will be. They may send repeated messages, ask mutual friends about you, or create situations designed to keep themselves present in your life. These actions are often motivated by a desire to monitor whether their influence still exists. What makes this escalation particularly disturbing is that it reveals how much the relationship may have depended on control rather than mutual respect. Healthy relationships do not require constant manipulation to survive. Healthy relationships allow room for boundaries, independence, and emotional freedom. When someone reacts to your growth by increasing pressure, creating chaos, or intensifying emotional tactics, it often exposes an unhealthy foundation that was hidden beneath the surface. As you continue becoming less reactive, the narcissist may experience growing frustration. The strategies that once guaranteed results now produce little effect. The emotional hooks that once pulled you into conflict no longer seem effective. The confusion, guilt, fear, and obligation that once controlled your decisions begin losing their influence. This forces the narcissist to confront a reality they desperately want to avoid. They cannot control someone who has stopped seeking their approval and stopped participating in the emotional games that once defined the relationship. One of the most confusing and emotionally exhausting things a narcissist may do when they realize they are losing control is rewrite history. This behavior can leave you questioning your own memories, doubting your experiences, and wondering whether the events you clearly remember actually happened the way you think they did. For many people, this becomes one of the most disturbing parts of the entire relationship because it attacks something deeply personal, your sense of reality. When a narcissist begins to feel their influence slipping away, they face a serious problem. The version of themselves they have worked hard to maintain is being threatened. They may have spent years presenting themselves as the caring partner, the misunderstood friend, the devoted family member, or the victim of everyone else's mistakes. As long as you remained engaged in the relationship, they could often control how much of the truth was exposed. But when you start pulling away, setting boundaries, or refusing to participate in their games, they lose that control. Suddenly, there is a risk that their behavior will be seen more clearly, both by you and by others. Rather than taking responsibility for their actions, many narcissists attempt to protect their self-image by altering the story itself. If they cannot change what happened, they try to change how it is remembered. This process often begins subtly. They may deny saying something you distinctly remember hearing. They may claim that a conversation never took place. They may insist that an argument happened differently than it actually did. At first, these incidents can seem minor. Everyone misremembers details occasionally, so it is easy to give them the benefit of the doubt. Over time, however, a pattern begins to emerge. The details they misremember almost always seem to benefit them. Their hurtful comments disappear from the story. Their broken promises are forgotten. Their manipulative behavior is minimized or justified. Meanwhile, your reactions become exaggerated, your mistakes become the central focus, and your intentions are portrayed in the worst possible light. The result is a distorted narrative that places them in a favorable position while shifting blame onto you. This is not simply about avoiding accountability, it is also about maintaining power. A narcissist understands that if they can control the story, they can influence how people interpret the relationship. Facts become less important than perception. If they can convince you that your memory is unreliable, they weaken your confidence in your own judgment. If they can convince others that they were the victim, they protect their reputation while isolating you from potential support. Many people who have experienced this behavior describe feeling as though they are trapped in an alternate reality. They remember events clearly, yet they are repeatedly told those events never happened. They recall promises that were made, only to hear those promises denied. They remember being hurt by specific actions, only to be told they are too sensitive, too emotional, or completely mistaken. Over time, this constant contradiction can create deep self-doubt. That self-doubt becomes a powerful tool. When you begin questioning your own perceptions, you become easier to manipulate. Instead of trusting your instincts, you start seeking confirmation from the very person who is distorting reality. You find yourself explaining, defending, and justifying your experiences in an attempt to prove what you know to be true. The more energy you spend defending reality, the less energy you have available for protecting your emotional well-being. As the narcissist realizes you are pulling away, the rewriting of history often becomes more aggressive. Incidents that were once acknowledged may suddenly be denied entirely. Clear examples of harmful behavior may be reframed as jokes, misunderstandings, or overreactions on your part. Situations where they were clearly responsible may be transformed into stories where they were unfairly treated. It can feel like watching someone erase pieces of the past and replace them with a completely different version. One particularly painful aspect of this behavior is how it affects your sense of identity. Our memories help shape our understanding of who we are and what we have experienced. When someone repeatedly challenges those memories, they are indirectly challenging your ability to trust yourself. You may begin wondering whether you are the problem. You may question whether you misunderstood everything. You may even feel guilty for holding on to memories that the narcissist insists are inaccurate. This confusion is often intensified by the confidence with which the narcissist tells their version of events. They may speak with absolute certainty, even when they are contradicting facts. Their confidence can be persuasive, especially if you have already spent years being conditioned to doubt yourself. The more certain they appear, the more tempting it becomes to question your own recollection. Another reason narcissists rewrite history is that they fear exposure. The truth threatens the image they want to maintain. If they admitted what really happened, they might have to confront feelings of shame, failure, or responsibility that they desperately want to avoid. Altering the narrative allows them to escape those uncomfortable emotions. Instead of facing the consequences of their actions, they create a story where they are justified, misunderstood, or victimized. This behavior often extends beyond private conversations. The narcissist may begin sharing their revised version of events with friends, family members, coworkers, or anyone willing to listen. The story they tell others may bear little resemblance to reality, but it serves an important purpose. It reinforces their preferred narrative while making it more difficult for others to see the truth. In some cases, people who were not present for the original events may accept the narcissist's version without question, creating additional frustration and isolation for the person who actually lived through the experience. One of the most empowering moments in recovery comes when you stop trying to convince a narcissist to acknowledge the truth. You begin to understand that their willingness to rewrite history is not evidence that your memories are wrong. It is evidence that accepting reality would require them to confront things they are unwilling to face. The more secure you become in your own understanding of what happened, the less vulnerable you are to their attempts to distort it. Your confidence in your own experiences becomes stronger than their ability to deny them, stronger than their attempts to confuse you, and stronger than the carefully constructed stories they use to protect themselves from accountability. One of the most confusing experiences people face when distancing themselves from a narcissist is the sudden appearance of kindness. After months or even years of criticism, neglect, manipulation, emotional inconsistency, or control, the narcissist may suddenly become the person you always hoped they would be. They become attentive, they listen more carefully, they offer compliments, they express regret, they promise change. They may even begin treating you with a level of respect and affection that seemed impossible before. For someone who has spent a long time longing for this kind of treatment, the shift can feel almost miraculous. The timing, however, is what makes this behavior so important to understand. In many cases, this wave of kindness does not appear during the years when you were asking for healthier communication, clearer boundaries, or basic emotional support. It often appears when the narcissist realizes that you are no longer emotionally invested in the same way. It emerges when your attention is fading, when your dependence is decreasing, and when your willingness to tolerate unhealthy behavior is coming to an end. The kindness arrives not necessarily because they have finally understood your pain, but because they have finally recognized the possibility of losing their influence over you. This sudden change can create enormous emotional conflict. Part of you wants to believe it is genuine. After all, everyone hopes people can change. Everyone wants to believe that relationships can heal and that difficult situations can improve. When someone who has been distant suddenly becomes affectionate, it naturally awakens hope. You begin remembering the good moments instead of the painful ones. You start imagining a future where things are finally different. You wonder if perhaps all the struggles were leading to this breakthrough. A narcissist often understands this dynamic very well. They know what you have been craving. They know the words you have wanted to hear. They know the gestures that make you feel valued. Because they have observed your emotional needs for a long time, they often know exactly how to present themselves in a way that reignites your hope. This does not mean every act of kindness is intentionally calculated, but it does mean that the sudden shift often serves a purpose beyond simple affection. What makes the situation particularly difficult is that the kindness may appear incredibly convincing. The narcissist may apologize with emotion. They may admit mistakes they previously denied. They may speak about personal growth, self-awareness, and a desire to repair the relationship. They may become more available, more generous, and more attentive than they have been in years. For a while, it can feel as though everything is finally moving in the right direction. The challenge is that genuine change is usually demonstrated through consistency over time. Healthy transformation requires accountability, humility, and a willingness to alter long-established patterns. It involves making different choices day after day, especially when circumstances become difficult. Sudden kindness, on the other hand, can appear quickly because it is often easier to perform than true personal growth. A narcissist may be capable of acting loving and supportive for a period of time, particularly when they are motivated by the fear of losing someone. This fear becomes especially intense when they realize that your emotional dependence is fading. For years, they may have assumed you would always remain available. They may have believed that no matter how poorly they treated you, you would continue seeking their approval. When that assumption begins to collapse, they experience a threat to their sense of control. The person who once worked tirelessly to preserve the relationship is now stepping back. The person who once tolerated unacceptable behavior is now establishing boundaries. The person who once fought for every scrap of affection is beginning to find fulfillment elsewhere. At that point, kindness can become a strategy to restore the old dynamic. The narcissist senses that direct manipulation is losing effectiveness, so they switch approaches. Instead of creating conflict, they create hope. Instead of criticizing, they praise. Instead of withdrawing affection, they offer it generously. The goal is not necessarily to strengthen the relationship in a healthy way. The goal is often to pull you back into emotional engagement. One reason this strategy is so powerful is that it targets your deepest desires. Most people entering relationships are not looking for conflict. They are looking for love, acceptance, connection, and understanding. When those things are suddenly offered after a long period of deprivation, it can feel impossible to resist. The kindness creates a powerful contrast against the pain that came before it. Because the positive behavior feels so relieving, there is a tendency to overlook the patterns that led to the problems in the first place. Another reason the kindness can be confusing is that it may contain elements of sincerity. Human behavior is rarely completely one-dimensional. A narcissist may genuinely fear losing you. They may genuinely enjoy your presence. They may genuinely experience moments of affection. The problem is not necessarily that every kind gesture is fake. The problem is that the underlying motivation often revolves around preserving access, influence, or control, rather than developing a healthy and balanced relationship. As a result, the kindness frequently fades once the immediate threat of losing you has passed. Once the narcissist feels reassured that you are emotionally invested again, old behaviors may gradually return. The criticism resurfaces, the manipulation reappears, the emotional inconsistency returns. Promises are forgotten, boundaries are challenged. The cycle begins repeating itself, often leaving you even more confused than before. This pattern can be emotionally devastating because it creates a cycle of hope and disappointment. Every time the kindness appears, you begin believing things are different. Every time the old behavior returns, you experience another wave of hurt. Over time, this cycle can make it difficult to trust your own judgment. You may find yourself constantly wondering whether the current version of the person is the real one or whether another shift is waiting around the corner. The The most important thing to remember is that meaningful change is measured by consistency, accountability, and respect over an extended period of time. It is not measured by dramatic promises made during moments of crisis. It is not measured by temporary bursts of affection that appear only when someone fears losing control. Lasting transformation reveals itself through stable actions, reliable behavior, and a demonstrated commitment to treating others with dignity, regardless of whether their influence is being challenged.